Hi, and welcome to part 2 of the Bible study of where is Jesus in the Old Testament? And that question is kind of fascinating because is Jesus actually in the Old Testament? Or are we reading back into it? And you can look at part 1, and we looked at places where people have tried to say, oh, I think it's there, which you can come to your own conclusions. You can watch the video, kind of some of the ideas, the understanding of scholars. And then today, we're looking at a few passages that are actually read often during Advent, during the season between right after Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so there are 4 Sundays in the season of Advent, and often there are pairings of New Testament passages and passages from the Old Testament or the Hebrew scriptures, and they're supposed to be complementary. And so there are questions about, well, are those passages talking about Jesus? And so today we are not going to look at Isaiah. We're going to look at the Isaiah passages next month, but this month we're going to look at Jeremiah, Malachi, Zephaniah, and Micah. And to begin with the Jeremiah passage, which is Jeremiah 33:14 through 16. The time is coming, declares the Lord, when I will fulfill my gracious promise with the people of Israel and Judah. In those days and at that time, I will raise up a righteous branch from David's line, who will do what is just and right in the land. In those days, Judah will be saved and Jerusalem will live in safety. And this is what he will be called. The Lord is our righteousness. All right. So Jeremiah is writing at a time where out of Judah, where they have watched as the Assyrians of the north actually came and took over the area of northern Israel, or the 10 tribes of Israel as they are referred to, and they have taken them off into exile. So they have watched that. They've also watched as Assyria starts coming and knocking on Judah's door, on Jerusalem's door, and they're going to have to fight them off. And Jeremiah is talking through about 3 kings. So he's given a sense of here's what's coming. And those 3 kings, ultimately the last one, King Zedekiah, 597 to 587 BCE, is absolutely going to lose the kingdom of Judah. Babylon is going to come. And there's this moment of they're going to be taken off into exile. And Jeremiah is going to run to Egypt for safety. So he's going to be in exile in Egypt. So lots of bad things are happening in many ways, right? It's these moments of they are losing their home. And so a prophet's job is about being real about the situation in the moment, and is usually giving a sense of, all right, here's where we've kind of gone wrong and here's where it needs to go right. And so this moment of Jeremiah talking, and I will raise up a righteous branch from David's line. Like there is this, he's trying to give hope that King David, who had united the 12 tribes of Israel, that someone will come along from that branch and they will bring peace, that they will bring the tribes together. And we may notice there's quite a bit of military imagery, and we have to understand that they're going to use the imagery that they understand. They are going to use agricultural imagery. They are going to use military imagery to try to understand how God is at work in this time and in this place. And so that's just kind of important for us to consider. So when reading through this, we may go, all right, well, who are we talking about? The Lord is our righteousness. The Lord does right actions. And so that there's a sense of there will be a time where things will get better. And that is very hopeful. And we can then see where Christians kind of go back and they're looking for like little clues about where is Jesus and is Jesus in the Old Testament? And we read that passage, right, where Jesus says, hey, the prophets even talked about me. And you're like, well, where did the prophets talk about you? And so we can understand where maybe sometimes they go back, but to also recognize that the time, place that this is the time of it being written and the place it is being written, that the people would have heard it as things are really bad. We haven't had great kings, and Babylon is going to invade. And we don't know what's going to happen. And where is God? Where is God going to be with us then? And then we can look at Malachi 3, verses 1 through 4. And this is written 100 years almost before the Jeremiah passage. So the Malachi 3, 1 through 4, it says, look, I'm sending, or it's after 100 years. Malachi is written 100 years after the Jeremiah passage. So they have been taken into exile. They have been in that place of, all right, Babylon won, and will we ever see home again? And so Malachi 3 is being written after that of exile, and then they're allowed to go back to Jerusalem. They are allowed to go back, and they rebuild the temple. And so it's believed that this is being written after the temple is rebuilt. And so Malachi 3, 1 through 4 says, look, I'm sending my messenger who will clear the path before me. Suddenly the Lord whom you are seeking will come to his temple. The messenger of the covenant in whom you take delight is coming, says the Lord of heavenly forces. Who can endure the day of his coming? Who can withstand his appearance? He is like the refiner's fire, the cleaner's soap. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. He will purify the Levites and refine them like gold and silver. They will belong to the Lord, presenting a righteous offering. The offering of Judah and Jerusalem will be pleasing to the Lord as in ancient days and in former years. So that since that the temple has come back together and there is going to be this messenger who clears a path, and the Lord whom you are seeking is going to now be in the temple. God is with them in a new and kind of a different way. And so sometimes this has been interpreted as the messenger being John the Baptist who clears the way for Jesus. But that's not exactly what this says here. But that we can understand how that gets read back into it. And then who can endure the day of his coming? Who can withstand his appearance? Like, it's so powerful. It's so overwhelming. And he will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. So whoever the person is that's being described here, it's a sense of they are going to help evolve and transform. This is a process of coming into alignment of God's way of living. And it's kind of interesting to think about that because Jesus often is helping in the way of, all right, Jesus is helping us understand what does it mean for each of us to live God's way? The healing, the encouraging, the love, what are those things? But it's also important to note that verse 4 says the offering of Judah and Jerusalem will be pleasing to the Lord as in ancient days and in former years. So it's kind of like this renewal of Judah and Jerusalem will happen. These holy special places, and to recognize how there's this hope for that, a hope for renewal, a hope that people will be refined. And so you can understand how it maybe gets read, but you can also see how, you know what, they're just out of the exile, they are just back home in Jerusalem, and here is how they're going to go forward. And then looking at Zephaniah chapter 3, verses 14 through 20. Now we're going back old again. We're actually going back really a little bit at the time, right around the time of Jeremiah, actually a little bit before Jeremiah, because Zephaniah is the early part of Josiah's reign, and Josiah's reign is 640 to 609, and Josiah was seen, especially at the beginning, as a king who brought reform. A king who was very concerned with God's way of living. And it was after a period of time where they were understood as not being God's way. They were not living God's way. And so here we get a little bit of interesting, like recognizing with Josiah something different is coming. Rejoice, daughter Zion, shout Israel. Rejoice and exult with all your heart, daughter Jerusalem. The Lord has removed your judgment. He has turned away your enemy. The Lord, the King of Israel, is in your midst. You will no longer fear evil. On that day it will be said to Jerusalem, don't fear Zion. Don't let your hands fall. The Lord your God is in your midst, a warrior bringing victory. He will create calm with his love. He will rejoice over you with singing. I will remove from you those worried about the appointed feast. They have been a burden for her, a reproach. Watch what I am about to do to all your oppressors at that time. I will deliver the lame. I will gather the outcast. I will change their shame into praise. and fame throughout the earth. At that time, I will bring all of you back. At that time, I will gather you. I will give you fame and praise among all the neighboring peoples when I restore your possessions and you can see them, says the Lord. So here we've got, all right, early in Josiah's reign, like there's this real hope that, yes, things have absolutely changed. Like no more fear. Like those enemies, which Josiah at the time, it would have been more like before him, Assyria trying to come in before Babylon overthrows Assyria. And there's this fear. And so Josiah comes in and brings something like, refreshing, like something can happen. But at the same time, when we're reading it, we can understand how people look back and go, wait a minute, he will create calm with love. Sounds a little bit like Jesus. Or where it says, watch what I am about to do to all your oppressors at that time. I will deliver the lame. I will gather the outcast. I will change their shame into praise and fame throughout the earth. And we can think of Jesus doing that with a whole lot of people. He is healing and he is lifting people up where other people have cast them aside, where people are like, you don't matter. And Jesus is like, no, you do. So you can see where there is overlap. And then with Micah 5:2 through 5a, this one is even earlier. So this one is during 3 kings, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah being 715 to 687 BCE. And this one, it's important to hear that Hezekiah was considered an excellent king. He was considered a king that was almost on the same level as King David who had brought the 12 tribes of Israel together. And so Hezekiah is seen as bringing people together, and Hezekiah is able to keep the Assyrians out of Jerusalem. So looking at this passage, it says, as for you, Bethlehem of Ephrathah, though you are the least significant of Judah's forces, one who is to be a ruler in Israel on my behalf will come out from you. His origin is from remote times, from ancient days. Therefore, he will give them up until the time when she who is in labor gives birth. The rest of his kin will return to the people of Israel. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. They will dwell secure because he will surely become great throughout the earth. He will become one of peace. When Assyria invades our land and treads down our fortresses, then we will raise up against him 7 shepherds and 8 human princes. So on one level, we can hear, especially knowing that this is during the time period, Micah, there's a little bit of King Hezekiah and just what Hezekiah is able to do. And then we can also, right, there are little things of going, oh, this is why we kind of read it at very close to Christmas Eve, why we read it at Lessons and Carols. There's this sense of, oh, Bethlehem. But to remember, Hezekiah is part of David's line. And so even pulling that about he is from ancient, that the ruler is going to be from remote times and from ancient days, that Hezekiah, actually, he looks a lot like King David. There's a lot of similarities. And so we can hear that. But at the same time, we can also see where people looking back, where Christians can go, oh, like, oh, do I see a connection to Jesus here? Oh, this kind of makes sense, especially with the thought of Bethlehem, or with this moment of he will become one of peace. And if we didn't finish reading that, when Assyria invades our land and treads down our forces, to go, okay, well, we're looking back at a very different time period of going, yeah, Jesus is one who tries to bring peace. A very different, right? That whole thing about military imagery, and Jesus was absolutely not about military imagery, about that he was going to throw out the Romans, because a lot of people thought he was. And so Jesus was not into overthrowing the Roman Empire. He was doing something else. But we can understand why maybe some people can kind of look at this and go, oh, I can see a connection. While others are like, no, maybe not so much. So I hope that brings some food for thought about how you may discern Where is Jesus in the Old Testament? Is Jesus even in the Old Testament? What are these passages really talking about? I hope that this has been helpful, and may you be blessed in this study and in a greater understanding of God.